Brooksville, Ohio was the kind of town where everyone knew each other, and life moved at a slow, steady pace. Emily Watson, 35, and her husband Tom, 38, seemed to have it all. A beautiful home on Maple Street, two lovely children, and a marriage that had lasted 15 years. To their neighbors, the Watsons were the picture of a happy, successful family. Tom, a well-known accountant, provided a stable life, while Emily, a stay-at-home mom, kept everything in order. But behind closed doors, things weren't as perfect as they seemed. As time went on, Emily started to feel a growing emptiness in her life. The daily routine of chores, school runs, and social events left her longing for something more. The spark in her marriage had faded, replaced by a dull routine that felt impossible to escape. The smiles she and Tom shared with their neighbors hid the growing distance between them, a distance Emily couldn't ignore. She craved excitement, passion, anything to break the monotony that had taken over her life. It was during one of her attempts to break free from this routine that Emily first walked into Fit for Life, the local gym where Mark Adams, 36, worked. Mark was everything Tom wasn't: charismatic, energetic, and most importantly, he noticed Emily in a way she hadn't felt in years. From the very first session, there was a strong connection between them. Mark's compliments, his constant attention, and the way he motivated her to reach her fitness goals woke up something in Emily that had been dormant for a long time. What started as casual chats about health and fitness soon turned into longer, more personal conversations. Mark wasn't just a gym trainer, he was an escape for Emily. Every time she walked through the gym doors, she left behind the weight of her ordinary life and entered a place where she felt alive again. She started looking forward to her sessions, not just for the workout, but for the connection she was building with Mark. Before long, their relationship crossed the line from professional to something much more personal and dangerous. As their connection deepened, Emily felt a mix of excitement and guilt. She knew she was walking a dangerous path, but the thrill was too tempting to resist. The attention and affection she longed for were now within reach, and she wasn't ready to let go. With each secret meeting, the stakes grew higher, and Emily found herself caught in a web of lies that would eventually lead to devastating consequences. It was late September when Emily first noticed Mark's lingering gaze. She had just finished a particularly intense workout, sweat glistening on her skin, when she caught Mark watching her from across the room. It was a look she hadn't seen in years, a look that made her feel desired, wanted. At that moment, something shifted. The harmless flirtation became charged with a new energy, and both of them felt it. The next time they met, the tension was palpable. During a one-on-one session, Mark suggested they grab a smoothie after the workout. Emily knew it went too far, but she couldn't help but be seduced by the excitement. They found themselves in a quiet corner of a small cafe, far enough from town that they wouldn't be recognized. The conversation flowed easily, but beneath the surface, there was an undercurrent of unspoken desire. As they parted ways, Mark gently brushed his hand against hers, a simple touch that sent a jolt of electricity through Emily. She knew then that this was no ordinary friendship. As the weeks went on, the affair quickly escalated. Mark would send her playful texts late at night, filled with double meanings and inside jokes. Emily's heart would race every time her phone buzzed, and she found herself eagerly awaiting his messages. What started as stolen glances and casual touches turned into clandestine meetings at a secluded cabin on the outskirts of town, a place where no one would find them. The rush of adrenaline, the secrecy, the danger, it all became intoxicating. Emily was hooked, but the excitement of the affair soon gave way to a darker side. The lies began to pile up, and with each one, Emily felt herself sinking into a pit of deceit. She told Tom she had joined a new book club that met twice a week, conveniently scheduled during her trysts with Mark. When Tom suggested joining her at the gym, she quickly shut him down, claiming it was her me time, something she needed to maintain her sanity. But the more lies she told, the more paranoid she became. She started to notice small things: a missed call from Tom that she didn't return right away, a text from Mark that popped up while she was with her kids. The constant fear of being discovered gnawed at her, yet she couldn't stop. As the affair continued, Emily's behavior at home grew more erratic. She was constantly on edge, jumping at every sound, every unexpected knock at the door. She started drinking more, just to take the edge off. But it only made things worse. The once loving and attentive wife became distant and irritable, snapping at Tom and the children over the smallest things. Tom, ever the doting husband, noticed the change, but couldn't put his finger on what was wrong. He tried to reach out to her, to rekindle the spark in their marriage, but Emily was too far gone. Her thoughts were consumed by Mark when she could see him next, how she could keep the affair hidden, what would happen if Tom ever found out. But Emily wasn't the only one feeling the strain. Mark, too, was growing restless. The thrill of the affair was losing its appeal, and he began to push Emily for more. He wanted her to leave Tom, to start a new life with him. He dangled the promise of a fresh start, a life free from secrets and lies. But Emily was torn. She couldn't bear the thought of leaving her children, of destroying the life she had built. And yet the thought of losing Mark was equally unbearable. The pressure from Mark only intensified Emily's anxiety. She started having nightmares, visions of Tom finding out, of the children hating her, of being exposed in front of the entire town. She began to unravel, her emotions swinging wildly from one extreme to the next. One moment she was convinced she could manage it all, that she could keep the affair hidden and her family intact. The next, she was consumed by guilt and fear, convinced that it was only a matter of time before everything came crashing down. As the affair dragged on, Emily started to notice strange things happening. One evening, she came home to find her favorite vase shattered on the floor, though no one else was in the house. Another time, she found a note slipped under her windshield wiper with a single word: soon. She couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching her, that someone knew her secret. But who? Was it Tom? A neighbor? Or was it just her mind playing tricks on her, driven to the edge by the constant lies and deception? Despite these ominous signs, Emily couldn't bring herself to end the affair. The pull was too strong, the addiction too strong. She started taking more risks, meeting Mark in places where they could easily be seen, even bringing him into her home when Tom was away on business. Each time she told herself it would be the last, that she would walk away before things went too far. But she knew there was no turning back. Tom Watson was never the paranoid type. He trusted his wife, Emily. Implicitly, after all, they had been together for 15 years, weathering the ups and downs of marriage like any other couple. But as the months passed, something began to gnaw at him, a feeling he couldn't quite shake. It started with small things. Emily's sudden interest in late-night gym sessions, her newfound obsession with her appearance, the way she would pull away whenever he tried to get close. At first, Tom chalked it up to a midlife crisis, maybe even a harmless desire for some personal space. But the changes in her behavior were too stark, too sudden to ignore. Tom's suspicions grew when he noticed Emily's increasing secrecy. Her phone, once left carelessly around the house, was now always within arm's reach, the screen locked and turned away. He began to notice how she would quickly end calls when he entered the room, or how she would suddenly become flustered when he asked about her day. There were other signs: two strange receipts in her purse for things she never mentioned, unexplained absences, and a distant look in her eyes that Tom couldn't penetrate. He tried to convince himself it was nothing, that he was imagining things, but he knew something was very wrong. One evening, after Emily had rushed out for another gym session, Tom decided to trust his gut. He had always been respectful of Emily's privacy, but that night, something pushed him to investigate. As he sat in their quiet living room, the house feeling emptier than ever, he reached for Emily's laptop. She had left it on the kitchen counter, and for the first time, Tom felt a pang of guilt as he opened it. But that guilt quickly turned to dread as he began to dig. At first, there was nothing, just the usual emails, grocery lists, and mundane correspondence. But then he found it, a hidden folder buried within the recesses of her inbox, labeled innocuously as work notes. His heart pounded as he clicked on it, revealing a series of emails exchanged between Emily and someone named M. The messages were brief, cryptic, but the content was unmistakable. They spoke of secret meetings, passionate encounters, and plans to be together. The final piece of evidence came when Tom opened the attached photos. Grainy images of Emily and Mark Adams, the gym trainer, locked in an embrace. The betrayal hit him like a freight train, and for a moment he couldn't breathe. His hands shook as he stared at the screen. the reality of the situation crashing down on him. The woman he had loved, the mother of his children, had been lying to him for months. Every late-night workout, every smile she had given him, had been a facade. He was filled with a rage he had never known before, a fury that consumed him entirely. When Emily returned home that night, she was greeted not by the usual warmth of her husband, but by a man on the edge. Tom was waiting for her in the living room, the laptop open on the coffee table, the damning emails displayed in full view. Emily's face drained of color as she saw the evidence. Her worst fears realized. The confrontation that followed was explosive. Tom demanded answers, his voice trembling with anger and hurt, while Emily tried in vain to explain, to justify, to apologize. But it was too late. Every word she spoke only fueled Tom's rage further. The argument escalated quickly, the air thick with tension and unspoken accusations. Tom, his voice rising with each question, accused Emily of destroying their family, of betraying the trust they had built over the years. Emily, cornered and desperate, lashed out in return, blaming Tom for pushing her away, for making her feel unloved and unwanted. The words cut on both sides, leaving wounds that could never heal. As the night wore on, the confrontation grew more intense. The love that had once bound them together was now a distant memory, replaced by bitterness and resentment. Tom's pain turned into a cold resolve he couldn't let this go. He wouldn't let Emily's betrayal destroy everything they had worked for, but the choices he made in the heat of that moment would set off a chain of events that neither of them could ever reverse. The discovery of the affair was just the beginning. The true tragedy was still to come. In the early hours of that fateful night, Tom made a decision that would seal his fate. The idea of confronting Mark had been swirling in his mind for days, but now it had crystallized into a deadly resolve. He couldn't just let this go. He had to face the man who had destroyed his life. Armed with the handgun he had long kept as a reminder of his military service, Tom set out into the night, his thoughts focused on one thing: making Mark pay. As he approached Mark's apartment complex, the normally quiet neighborhood seemed silent, as if anticipating the tragedy that was about to unfold. Tom waited in the shadows, his heart pounding, his grip tightening around the gun. When Mark finally appeared, exhausted from his late shift, he barely had time to register the danger before Tom stepped out of the darkness, confronting him with a calmness that belied the storm raging inside. Mark, caught off guard, tried to defuse the situation, but Tom's mind was made up. The conversation was brief, charged with tension and unspoken threats. And then, in a moment that felt both slow and instantaneous, Tom raised the gun and pulled the trigger. The shot rang out, shattering the stillness of the night and sending Mark crashing to the ground. Tom stood there staring at what he had done, the enormity of his actions crashing down on him like a tidal wave. The crime scene was a shocking contrast to the peaceful suburban life Tom once knew. Mark's lifeless body lay on the cold pavement, lit by the harsh streetlights. Blood pooled around him, a grim reminder of the sudden violence. The gun in Tom's hand felt heavier as the reality of what he had done started to sink in. The sound of sirens grew louder, but Tom didn't move. He was frozen in that moment, replaying it in his mind over and over. When the police arrived, they found Tom standing over Mark's body, dazed and unresponsive. The officers moved quickly, securing the scene and taking Tom into custody. There was no struggle, no resistance. Tom knew that his life, as he had known it, was over. The arrest was swift, and as he was led away, the reality of his situation began to settle in. The man who had once been a respected member of the community was now a murderer, his life reduced to the cold, hard facts of the crime he had just committed. The aftermath rippled through Brooksville like a shockwave. News of the murder spread quickly, turning the quiet town into a hub of speculation and fear. Neighbors who had once admired the Watsons now spoke in hushed tones, unable to reconcile the image of the happy family with the brutal crime that had taken place. Emily, devastated by the news, was left to grapple with the consequences of her actions. The affair that had once seemed like an escape had led to a nightmare that she couldn't wake from. The community, once tight-knit and trusting, was left shattered, its sense of security irrevocably damaged. Law enforcement wasted no time piecing together the events. The evidence was clear and damning, with Tom's confession sealing his fate. As the case moved toward trial, the town watched in horror as the details emerged, each revelation more shocking than the last. The tragic turn of events was a reminder of how quickly life can spiral out of control, and how the choices we make in moments of anger and despair can have irreversible consequences. The investigation began with a thorough examination of the crime scene. Forensic teams meticulously documented every detail, from the position of Mark's body to the shell casing from the gun that Tom had fired. Blood spatter analysis, ballistic tests, and fingerprinting were all conducted to establish a clear narrative of what had transpired. The evidence was damning. There was no question that Tom had pulled the trigger, but the police needed to understand the why. Investigators turned their attention to Tom's actions leading up to the murder. They seized his phone, laptop, and any other devices that might provide insight into his state of mind. It didn't take long for them to uncover the emails and messages between Emily and Mark, detailing their affair in painful clarity. These communications painted a picture of a man pushed to the brink by betrayal, his emotions boiling over until they erupted in violence. The police began conducting interviews with those closest to the Watsons. Friends, neighbors, and family members were questioned, each providing pieces of the puzzle. Tom's colleagues described him as a stable, hard-working man who had shown no signs of instability until recently. Emily's friends, however, revealed a different side of the story. They spoke of her growing dissatisfaction with her marriage, her increasing distance from Tom, and the time she spent at the gym where Mark worked. It became clear that the affair was common knowledge among those in Emily's circle, though none had anticipated it would lead to such a tragic end. Witnesses from the gym were also brought in for questioning. They described the chemistry between Emily and Mark, how they would often be seen laughing and chatting during workouts, sometimes staying late after the gym had closed. While most saw it as harmless flirting, others admitted that they had suspected something more was going on. One witness even recalled seeing them leaving the gym together late at night, heading in the direction of the secluded cabin where they often met. As the investigation progressed, Mark's role in the tragic events became a focal point. Though he was the victim, the police needed to understand his involvement. They dug into his background, uncovering a history of affairs with other gym clients, though none had ended as disastrously as this one. Mark's friends and co-workers described him as charismatic but reckless, someone who thrived on the thrill of the chase. It became clear that Mark had pursued Emily with little regard for the potential consequences, his actions setting off a chain of events that spiraled out of control. As the trial began, the courtroom was packed with spectators, reporters, and members of the community, all eager to witness the unfolding drama. The atmosphere was tense, charged with a mix of anticipation and sorrow. Emily sat quietly in the back, her face pale and drawn, the weight of her choices evident in every line of her expression. She knew that her affair had set these tragic events in motion, but now she was powerless to change the course of what was about to happen. One of the most dramatic moments of the trial came when Emily was called to testify. She spoke haltingly, her voice breaking as she recounted the events leading up to the murder. She admitted to the affair, expressing remorse for her actions, but also described the tension that had been building between her and Tom in the days leading up to the incident. With the verdict delivered, it was time for the sentencing. The judge called Tom to stand, giving him one last opportunity to address the court. Tom's voice was quiet, almost broken, as he spoke. "I know that what I did was wrong, and there's no excuse for it. I took a life, and I have to live with that every day. I'm sorry to Mark's family, to my own family, and to everyone I've hurt. I never meant for any of this to happen, but I know that doesn't change what I did. I'm ready to accept whatever punishment the court sees fit." His words were simple, but the weight of his remorse was clear. The judge, his face lined with the burden of the decision he had to make, delivered the sentence with measured gravity. "Thomas Watson, you have been found guilty of second-degree murder. The court sentences you to 25 years to life in prison. This sentence reflects the seriousness of your crime, but also acknowledges the emotional turmoil that contributed to your actions. I hope that in time, you will find peace with what you've done, and that the families involved can begin to heal." In the end, the tragedy of Tom Watson's actions was not just in the life he took, but in the lives he left in ruins. Brooksville would never be the same, its residents left to grapple with the uneasy truth that even in the quietest of towns, darkness can lurk just beneath the surface.